That's a pretty abbreviated version of Robert Johnson's Kind-Hearted Woman Blues, but it works for a number of his tunes, like Me and the Devil or Little Queen of Spades, sort of built on the same chassis, and probably a couple other ones that I'm not thinking about right now. It's in the key of A, but it starts off with really two turnarounds. Again, we talked about a turnaround as being a logical way to get from one chord voicing to another one. But he uses two of them back to back, like this. That's going from a D7 shape, starting at the ninth fret, going to that E shape, but that's still an A chord at the fifth fret, right? But not the whole chord, just a little bit of it. Just the treble strings, the first, second, and third string. It's almost like you cut off that other chord because you want that nice, open, almost discord when you strum the chord. So you go from this, the ninth fret, now before we go to the second part of that turnaround, you might notice something, that he has these triplets, those triplets are very much a part of his sound. You'll have that, little choppy tack 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 tack. That idea is the minute you hear that, you're listening. You know I'm listening to Robert Johnson, or I'm listening to somebody who listened to Robert Johnson. It may be Johnny Shines, it may be Robert Jr. Lockwood, it may be George Thorogood, whoever it is, but that is such a signature part of his sound. It's what I was talking about when I mentioned, when you open a Steinbeck novel, you start in Salinas County with rolling hills as opposed to, say a James Michener novel that starts at the beginning of the world. I mean, it's just part of his signature sound. Now, you take that turnaround and you add to it this turnaround, which is really a Robert Johnson-esque thing, walking down the D string from the fifth fret. So you have the first string at the fifth fret and the fourth string at the fifth fret, and you walk the fourth string back down while you hold the first string, right? And when you do that, what you end up with is this really cool A augmented chord. Now, you may not, Robert had fingers like spikes. They were like this amazingly long, sinuous fingers. So you may not be able to hold that first string down with your ring finger, and you might want to go pinky. And then use your other fingers to walk that fourth string back to the A. It's really up to you. How you get there as a guitarist, especially in this style, is up to you. It's what works for you. You might, just do this. And ignore the first string entirely, but it just doesn't sound as cool. And then we cap it off with the 5 chord, which is the E7, all right? Think about this style of playing. It's probably Robert was probably influenced by listening to someone like Scrapper Blackwell, who played with a guy named Leroy Carr. Scrapper Blackwell being the guitar player and Leroy Carr being the piano player. But wherever it was he got this turnaround from, it's pretty signature. So we'll go. Right. So the idea of moving, sliding into a chord is, again, another really cool blues idea, but how we slide into that chord from, say, an A flat into an A is a part of that signature sound. Think about this. Most of us grew up with the music of Elvis Presley, and Elvis often slid from the A flat into an A. Right? But he used that whole chord as he slid up from the A flat into the A. Robert uses an abbreviated form of that chord. So you get something that looks like a D shaped chord, except the index finger is on the fourth string and the middle finger is on the second string and the third finger is on the third string, right? So you do this. It's just sort of the equivalent of this, but it gives it a much different sound because the guitar is sort of ringing sympathetically. Unlike Piedmont Roll, unlike some of the other stuff like Lightning with his little thumping monotonic bass, you've got this muted bass behind Robert's stuff. And how do you mute that bass? Well, it's really important that the right hand is doing duty as well. The right hand, right at this meaty part right here, is resting lightly on the bass strings, allowing the treble strings to ring. It's like your drummer. That triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right? The D7 in Robert Johnson's music is usually up here in the first position, D7. But again, I like that idea of using your thumb, or if you form your D7 differently, to have the ability to come over here on the sixth string because it makes for a nice little walking bass transition into the A chord. So we kind of, from the beginning, Yeah, I just thought about something I should probably mention. Notice that when you take it back to the A flat, you put down this pinky on the one string. That makes it a diminished chord. Hear that? You hear that in his music a lot. We're going to run into it again a little bit later on. We do a lesson on Reverend Gary Davis where he uses that diminished chord like that as part of his A. Sort of enhances the drama of it, if you will. So we get kind-hearted woman, back to the A flat, doing anything in the world for me. In another song, it might become Little Queen of Spades, ooh, and the men can't leave her be. Or you might decide to use this D shape as your one chord. Little queen of spades. Ooh, men can't leave a bee. Right? Notice that you've got these little modules, in other words, and how you put that module together. Robert might use this one for one song and this one for another song, right? But it's very modular. It's you can put it together as you need to put it together to make it what you need it to be, right? So that little moving A figure. Now you can go directly to the D7th from there, or you can do this other little Robert thing where you go grab the A chord as you normally would, first position A, right? But then walk down the one string, 5, 4, 3. Then into the D7. E7, D7, to that turnaround. The second turnaround we did. Back to the 5 chord. Got a kind on it, woman, ooh, yeah. Do anything anywhere for me. Got a kind on it, woman, ooh. Do anything anywhere for me. But those evil-hearted women, ooh, they just won't let me be. Love my baby, and so on, right? When we think about this idea of guitar modules and still connected with the pentatonic, right? Still connected with these little wonderful strings that allow us to go from chord to chord. It opens up our playing. So Robert's stuff is pretty distinctive as a style, but it can be a starting point. It can be a jumping off point to your own music. Let's say you are doing something 1-4-5 blues in A, and you want to use some Robert Johnson elements, all right? I should probably mention one thing, too, about tone before we do that. Notice that Robert's stuff is pretty staccato. It's kind of like, and some of that comes from where he plays it. The closer you get to the bridge, it's almost like this is the acoustic guitar player's tone knob. It becomes more trebly. In fact, I've heard like Lightning Hopkins do things that are like so much so that it really articulates the idea that something played here and something played there has a different tone. So to get that sort of authentic Robert Johnson sound, you might want to go a little closer to the bridge. Etc., right? But let's go off on this little journey. Let's say you're playing something, and let's find something totally ridiculous, totally sort of outside the blues genre, right? So let's say, you said I love you till I die. Said you'll forget in time. As the years went slowly by, she still preyed upon his mind. Kept a picture on the wall, went half crazy now and then, but he loved her through it all. hoping she'd come back again. He stopped loving her today. I learned up on his door. Soon they'll carry him away. He stopped loving her today. Now, that's pretty far out there, right? George Jones meets Robert Johnson, right? But the idea is that those modules can be used in different ways, in different songs, to give you that sort of Mississippi blues flavor, right? So learn how to do this turnaround. This turnaround. How to slide from the A flat to the A. Here, or here, or here, right? All of those little modules really kind of make you, I think, a better guitar player and give you a lot more versatility. That's why I say it's important to know the blues, because the blues is the base or the mother form for so many other styles of American music. Again, one more sort of Robert Johnson-esque thing that's really cool is that sometimes you'll hear him do what's called a rake, right? It's kind of like that. That little rake is what happens when you've got the index finger coming up and the thumb coming down, almost like turning a knob, right? And he uses it just sparingly, but uses it really effectively. This is kind of his guitar solo, in that song at least. The idea of coming up and catching, again, a D7th shape at the 9th fret, flattening it, coming up back to it, and you can either go to that transition, or you could take it all the way up to the 12th fret. So before you go back to your 4 chord. So there's a lot of flexibility and versatility in that playing. That nice loping tempo that you hear in a song like Kind-Hearted Woman doesn't always have to be that tempo. It could easily be which is kind of like Piedmont Roll, which we talked about in a previous lesson. If you've got that roll, you use that Robert Johnson chord. In fact, it even reminds me of something like Doc Watson's Deep River Blues, right? Let it rain, let it pour, let it rain a whole lot more, 'cause I got them deep river blues, right? So a lot of times we go from what we know to get to what we want to know, right? And nobody is going to stop you in the middle of a performance and say, "Excuse me, Doc Watson is actually using this, whereas you're using the Robert Johnson lick." They're just enjoying the music. So, again, get into some Robert Johnson, listen to him. Unfortunately, we have no video on him. He died in 1938, but his music is all over the internet, all over, the box set. You can get it, including the alternate recordings. And you might have to capo the guitar up a couple frets because Robert sang pretty high. And there's some controversy as to whether he was even recorded at a lower speed and whether his voice is bassy is whatever. Don't worry about that. What you really want to do is to get to the point where you understand what he's doing as a guitar player and how those modules fit together to make that music what you need it to be. It doesn't make, there is only one Robert Johnson, there was only one Lemon Jefferson, there's only one Reverend Gary Davis. Don't try to imitate those guys, but you can certainly learn from them, and their music helps to influence your music. And I think that if you do that, then the transaction's been complete. And somewhere up there, they're all smiling at you. Hopefully up there, they're smiling at you that you've been, you've used their music as an influence and it's just a jumping off point for your music. Thank you.